this presentation, The Whole Child Grows Up, because really we have a group of individuals here who have varying interests throughout their lives, their careers, and sometimes have made some course correction or shifts along the way. And so we have just a variety of folks here, and I want to introduce them just briefly, and they will share just a little bit more in our first question about what they're currently doing and the pathway that led them to their work. So right here we have Dawn Trudeau, and Dawn is chairperson of Force 10 Hoops LLC. She spent over 20 years in the software industry before taking the helm of the ownership group for the newly formed WNBA champion Seattle Storm. And so welcome. And next to Dawn is Adora Svitak. She's an author, she's a leader, she's a youth advocate. She has appeared on Good Morning America and many other programs to showcase her incredible writing ability and to encourage young people, children, to read and write. I had an opportunity recently to view TED Talks that Adora did, and it absolutely blew me away. And I am so excited that she's on our panel today, and I'm actually going to give her the final word at the end of the day here too, so we'll hear more from her in just a bit. And next to Adora is Jay Maybury, and Jay is our State Teacher of the Year currently, and he is from the Kent School District in the Puget Sound area, and we're so happy to have you with us here today, Jay. Since 2001, Jay's taught language arts at Kentwood High School. He's a national board certified teacher. He's, as you know, our 2011 Teacher of the Year. And we'll hear more about Jay. He's taken some interesting course corrections in his path and career as well. And next to Jay is Joseph Cranko, and Joseph is the Associate Conductor for Choral Activities for the Seattle Symphony. He's in his 27th year as Music Director of the Northwest Choirs. So thank you for joining us today. And we'll start with Dawn. We'll work our way down the panel as they'll start. I'm asking them to share a little bit about their current work, what's maybe even in their immediate future, and the pathway that they took to get there. And then as we move into the next two questions, which will be, the first will be, how did your K-12 experience, your school experience, either help you move along that pathway or not help you move along that pathway? We'll hear a little bit about that, and I'm going to encourage them to get more interactive in that conversation. And then finally, we'll engage our panel in sharing the advice they have for us in moving forward in our work to educate the whole child. So we want to hear what they have to say, and again, we're going to encourage them to be interactive with each other. So Dawn, we're going to start first with you to share.
Well, I can say for sure that I never thought that I would be doing what I'm doing today when I was growing up. I grew up in Iowa, went to a great school system there, and one of the things that got me here, what I'm doing today, is a lesson that I learned in 4th grade. I became a feminist in 4th grade, and that was back before feminism was a word that I even had heard or understood, but I did understand what I was seeing in front of me and what I was experiencing, and that was gym class. So at the time, some of you had the same kind of experience that I did, where we had little gym uniforms that we put on, and everybody went into the gym, and they sat all the girls on the side of the gym, and the boys played, and we watched them. And because at the time, girls weren't supposed to get sweaty. And I sat there and thought to myself, this just isn't fair. It's not right, and I want to play too. But it wasn't something that was done. And that really did shape how I viewed the world and how I started to view my place in the world. That there were opportunities that boys had that girls didn't have, and that I wanted girls to have those same opportunities. So as I got into business, I spent a lot of time trying to help nurture and mentor young women that were in the tech industry. I ended up moving to Michigan school when I was 18 and wanted to go to school there. Couldn't afford out-of-state tuition, so I thought I would work the first year and get residency so I could afford to go to school there. And that was in the mid-70s. And I happened to get, my first job was a HUD job, the Housing and Urban Development job. And it was a job training program. So they would pay half my salary for 3 months, and if I worked out, then the company would have to hire me. That happened to be in a company that made monitors at the time. So computers were not readily available. Most companies didn't have a computer. In fact, virtually nobody owned one. They were mainframes, and you dialed in over the line, over the telephone line, and used a monitor. So I started on the assembly line and worked there, got promoted to a tester, and basically started to understand this new industry that was going on. It wasn't even really much of an industry yet. Well, to make the long story short, I never ended up going to college. I just kept working in the computer industry and working my way up, and ultimately ended up at Microsoft and ran a couple divisions there before I went into working in the community with nonprofits. So we'll go back to how K through 12 helped, but I can say that having a great basic education gave me the tools and the skills to be able to learn what I needed to learn later on in my life and throughout my career.
Thank you so much. Anna Dora.
Yes, well, since I haven't finished my schooling yet, I'm continuing to see how I can be, helped by the education system. I have a very interesting early experience. When I was 3.5, I started reading, and my parents really wanted me to be able to enter classes that might have been advanced for my age because I was already reading chapter books. But the local school wasn't so happy about that idea, so I ended up being homeschooled for the early years of my life. And now I go to an online public school, and the experiences that I've had with non-traditional forms of learning and learning outside of a brick and mortar school have given me the chance to see that learning doesn't just take place within a classroom. It can take place at conferences, it can take place talking to wonderful people, it can take place when you're reading books and going to museums, as well as when you're in school, and whether that's online or inside a building. And I've also seen that people can be extremely supportive of you. I had, even through other ways, maybe not necessarily saying, I support you, I love what you're doing, but just being there and giving you a helping hand. So I've had the experience of having some wonderful teachers at my online school who I've only met face-to-face maybe a few times at field trips every couple of months, but who are always there and make that clear. So I've seen how connections can take place, not necessarily just face-to-face, but also online.
Thank you. Jay?
First of all, it's a real privilege to be here. Thank you very much for having me. Course correction is kind of an understatement. I always wanted to be a writer, wanted to be a sports writer, and I was for 7 years. I covered professional sports, covered some Sonics and Mariners and these kind of things. Was doing what I thought was my dream job, didn't want to change. But I really got tired of having to coddle million-dollar athletes, having to beg them for an interview, having them blow me off, and then having to go find a different plan. And women's basketball doesn't do that. But some other athletes do. And but the one group of athletes that I really enjoyed being around were the high school athletes. They wanted to talk with me. They were excited when I came around, and they wanted to chat with me. And I thought, well, what if I had more than just a half an hour with them? What if I had 4 years or more? And so I started investigating, looking into programs of getting my teaching certificate. And one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life was to work full-time and to go to school part-time, and financial strain and no time for myself. But I'm really glad I did it, because I ended up becoming a teacher in 2001. Left the sports world behind, and every time there's a Super Bowl or an All-Star game or something, I wish I was still doing it, but teaching keeps me plenty busy, and I never would have thought I'd be sitting here and you'd be talking about State Teacher of the Year or anything like that, but plans change, and so here I am. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Great. Joseph?
Again, yeah, thank you for inviting me. I'm thrilled to be here. My career, I think, is not uncommon to the theme that I'm hearing to the people on my right, which is what I thought I'd be doing and what I do now is very much a different thing. I think as a person who's found a career in the arts, I consider myself lucky to be able to make a living doing the thing I have a passion for and a love for. I I was drawn to music, I think, one Sunday evening in 1963 when the Beatles were on TV and Ed Sullivan, and it was more my father's reaction to the Beatles than anything else. And the next day at school, one of my best friends came to me and said, "I want to join the school band." And I said, "Well, what would you want? All I want to do is play baseball. What would you want to join the school band for?" He said, "Well, I want to be like Ringo." And I had never thought about that. And so I joined the school band, and like every other kid who joined the school band, there was probably, 4 or 5 clarinet players, 3 or 4 trumpet players, a couple sax players, and 1,000 drummers. And by, maybe the end of the school year, there was one drummer left, and that was me. And I'd gone to my father and I said, "Well, I hate band, I want to quit." And my father said, "Well, you made a commitment to be in the band, you're going to finish it up, and you're going to live up to your expectations and live up to the commitment you made." Had that conversation been a different conversation, I wouldn't be here, at least certainly in this capacity. I followed music with a fiery passion through college, only to come out and find out that getting a job was not as easy as I thought it would be, and that the world wasn't going to be the passage to my door, and then I had to figure out how to move forward from there. And that is, I think, a story that probably every person in this room has a parallel story to that. The resilience and the persistence and what it takes to make that happen. And I would have to say, without a doubt, and without getting ahead of ourselves, my education certainly set me up for that. So.
Great, thank you. Let's go back to Adora now for this next question. Let's have her start off because she is currently in the K-12 learning experience right now. And so Adora, share with us how your experience in public education right now, and it's taken different forms obviously over your life, is preparing you or not preparing you for where you want to go, or where you anticipate you might go.
Well, definitely, I find that online learning is really has allowed me to become familiar with more how technology can be used for more than just entertainment, but also for learning, and so that's been a great asset. And then also, last semester I took 2 electives at my local school, Redmond Junior High, and so I had that experience of being in a brick and mortar school and being able to compare and contrast. When I grow up, I want to continue doing what I'm doing now, which is writing, speaking to students about reading, writing, and teaching, and so by having this early experience with being able to see different types of school and different types of learning, compare different teaching techniques, and see how my teachers use classroom management techniques differently, that's definitely been a real first-hand education when it comes to wanting to make myself a better teacher. And so I think that in this way, having such a varied education through public education has given me great preparation. In other ways, I think that also education shows you a lot about diplomacy, working with many different types of people, working with whether it's students, teachers, principals, parents, and everyone is different, and so seeing that and seeing the diversity within my own school definitely is great preparation for becoming a really diplomatic person, I guess. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Dawn, how about you?
Well, junior high is one of those times when most kids are feeling awkward and going through changes and trying to understand how that all plays out. When I was in junior high, there's 3 things that really stick out to me. My home ec teacher taught us the importance of foundation garments. She really was very strong about that. Every girl in 7th grade should be wearing a girdle, which I never still haven't understood. Anyway, it definitely was one of those moments that I really remember. She also taught me to make a white sauce, which she thought was a fundamental of cooking, which I have to agree. Once you know how to make a white sauce, you can kind of figure out anything else. But the thing that I think was most profound for me in junior high was that I also learned what it was like to be other. I was awkward, as I said, and one day the girls started talking about Henry, this person named Henry, and how Henry was kind of goofy, and how Henry was kind of, bumbly, and how Henry was not very popular, and this went on for, it seems now like months, probably it was a couple of weeks, but anyway, Henry was this person that everybody was laughing about, and I couldn't figure out who Henry was, and eventually I figured out Henry was me. And that was when I realized that, being other is really a profoundly upsetting experience. And so throughout the rest of my life, I've tried to make sure that when I see others in the room, that I go up to them and talk to them, or try to make sure that others don't get treated in the way that I was treated. In high school, I found my voice. I joined the debate group, and I also joined the school newspaper. And for the first time, I realized that I could actually affect other people and change their opinions and educate them in the things that I thought of. So even though some of your school experiences aren't wonderful, they still teach you great lessons for life. And so those lessons really have driven me to do the things that I have done, both in my business career, in my volunteering with nonprofits, and even with the Storm. The reason that I'm so passionate about women's basketball is because it changes athletic girls from feeling like they're others, they're awkward, they're too tall or too different than the other girls, to having a passion that they can actually share with others and gain respect from. And what it does for girls to participate in sports is that it gives them a higher level of self-confidence, less likely to get pregnant, less likely to use drugs, but also learn that you try and you don't win every game, you fail, and that's okay. Trying is just as important as winning. And those are life lessons that I think all of us can benefit from, and also that really give you the confidence to go out and take risks and try new things and learn new careers and take different paths than what maybe are the tried and true or the easy ones, but that you can have great success if you are willing to do that. If you can educate yourself, if you are willing to take risks, you can accomplish things that you never could imagine.
Thank you. Let's go all the way down to Joe.
Great. I grew up in Southern California, and I think I had a very typical American school experience. A very middle-of-the-road school, middle economic group. The school district I went in had a lot of diversity, which I think led to a wonderful experience as I grew up. Academically, I don't think the programs that I was exposed to were anything spectacular, with the occasional luck of having a wonderful teacher here and there. I had the distinct disadvantage, anybody who's in my age group may have had the same disadvantage. We were taught new math, and we had to later on figure out how to actually add, because they didn't teach us how to do that. And I've seen that commonality with all the people in California in my age group. We all sort of stumble just a little bit as we figure out the tab at the end of the bill. And but aside from that, I think that education served me well. My school program served me well. One of the things that I work with young people a lot. My job at the Symphony is only part of what I do. I work with the Northwest Boy Choir and subsequent groups. I've done that for a number of years, and I've worked with young people really since I was in my early 30s. One of the things that I see that I had the advantage of now, that kids don't have the advantage of now, is I had time as a young person to actually experience life on a daily basis. I wasn't overburdened with too much homework. I had expectations, I had teachers who expected me to do things, but I also had time to play on sports teams and time to pursue music at a very serious level. Kids nowadays have a very hard time doing all of those things, and they find themselves burdened down. I was fortunate enough to have a family who sought out music for me outside of my school program, because my school program was somewhat limited due to resources and faculty. But I found a tremendous amount of support and tolerance within my school program from my teachers for my music. My baseball coach, who was probably one of the largest mentors of my life, actually made the exception for me to go into Los Angeles once a week and take my drum lesson, which he probably would not have made for anybody else. And he told me my senior year, he says, "I know you'd like to play baseball for a living. I've seen you play baseball for 4 years. I've seen you play the drums." And, but I took that as a broader understanding of him embracing the fact that there is more to being a person, a whole person, than just being good at one thing, but that you have the experience of doing multiple things. And I was fortunate at the time that I grew up in California to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Jay.
Well, I grew up on the island of Oahu in Hawaii. And I remember back to my second grade year when Mrs. Wong told us in creative writing that we could write about anything we wanted to write. and my eyes got about as big as the sausage you have on your table. I just couldn't believe that you would let me write whatever I wanted to write. And I even think about that today, and I thanked her on TV when I had a chance to talk, because that really got me on this road of really anything, you can explore anything. I want to give kids that opportunity to be able to explore anything, and that any word, even how young, it can have an impact. And so even though I teach high school, I have great admiration for elementary teachers and early learning and the impact that it can make, because by the time they get to me, if the elementary and middle school teachers haven't done their job, then my job becomes next to impossible. So my appreciation for that is through the ceiling. But then I left public education and I went to a private school after the 4th grade. My dad worked long hours and we couldn't afford the school that we went to, but my mom decided to leave her job and work at the school that I was at, and so it allowed me to do these things. So I realized that if I wouldn't have gotten the education I got unless people made sacrifices. And in fact, I got to call them tonight and thank them again. But I think about that all the time, that people make sacrifices for the advancement and improvement, and without that I wouldn't have been doing what I'm doing. My high school is the rival high school to President Obama's. And so it gives you an idea, I guess, of what level of work there is there. And everybody goes to college and everybody graduates, and that was the experience that I came from. So when I worked at Sears Hardware the summer after my senior year, before I went to college at the University of Washington, I was talking with a guy who had been working there for a while. He was a little older than me, but he'd been working there for a while. I said, "Hey, what college did you go to?" And he goes, "I didn't go to college. I started working here after high school." And I wanted to shrink to be about that big, because it never occurred to me that people didn't graduate from high school or didn't go to college. And that was such an eye-opening thing for me, and it shamed me to no end, because I just didn't realize that. I didn't grow up in the situation where people struggled with school. Everybody just did school. You just always did your homework. So now that I'm teaching in public education and I'm teaching in the high school, I have the students who don't turn in their work. They just don't do an assignment. And even now I shake my head, I have a hard time understanding the mentality of a student who just won't turn in their work. So I'm working on a daily basis to try and understand them, and it's taken 10 years and I'm still working at it. But there are struggles that kids are dealing with that I never had to struggle with. I've had all my needs met. I had people sacrificing for me. My students don't have that on a daily basis, not all of them anyway. And so my heart goes out to the kids who are on the lower end of the spectrum, who are dealing with things that I can't even imagine. And once in a while they tell me about those things, so I'm aware of the realities. But that learning my classroom content comes secondary to them getting their needs met. And it's been just really eye-opening for me, because that's not my background. But I experience it every day, and so I'm learning as I'm going.
Do any of the panelists have a follow-up question related to a comment that, Jay?
For Dawn, I don't know if I missed it, but when you were that one that you felt like didn't fit in, how did you go from that to where you are now? Did somebody do something for you, or did you just have to pick yourself up by your bootstraps and forge ahead, or how did that happen so that you could come back from something that was that impactful?
I don't remember any particular person helping me. I think it was more just that recognition that I had enough self-confidence to know that maybe I was awkward, but that I had value. And I also started working when I was 14 in a restaurant, washing dishes and bussing tables, and that in some ways changed the context of how I looked at the world, because I had a different perspective and I had a different set of priorities than the kids around me. And they started to become less relevant to me, I guess, by having that kind of experience. So, and then as I said, by the time that was sort of late junior high, and then when I got into high school and I realized that I could have a voice that influenced people, that really took me to a whole different place in terms of understanding what my potential was, and that it was up to me to have that potential and to realize that potential, and not let people's negativity affect how I thought what I could do with my life.
Any other questions that you might have for each other?
I just wanted to follow up. I'm not asking a question, but just as far as the idea of not fitting in, I've never had a negative experience where someone has been, talking about me. But I have seen where I recently wrote an article for the Huffington Post for the education section. I'm just reading the comments. Now, the good thing is that the comments are moderated, so I'm not reading like terrible comments or anything, but there are people who are just saying things are absolutely false, and I would get really angered by that. And when I think about it, we often talk about bullying or spreading false information. This is all a drama in high school and junior high, but a lot of times we often see it coming even from adults. And so by taking what we've learned from high school, I've never had experiences like that, but by taking what you've learned and applying that to later life and being resilient, I think that we can learn a lot from that, from our negative experiences, taking them and turning them into something positive.
Thank you. All right, let's go down to the end. We'll go back to Joe, and we'll go on to the third question. And the question is, what advice do you have to help schools meet the needs of the whole child?
Obviously, I think I will probably be able to speak most passionately from the arts end of it, and I think that's a vital part of what we do. And when I was in graduate school, I'll reveal my politics in this, and I apologize to anybody I offend. When I was in graduate school, Ronald Reagan was elected president, and I immediately wanted to return to politics to try to undo that situation. I had an opportunity to actually spend an hour and a half with him when I was in Boise State in California, and I didn't think that was a good move for our country, and so I got actively involved in politics again. And I walked into my conducting teacher and said, I think I'm going to pull out of school and go back to California and get back into the politics that I've been involved there. And he said, now why on earth would you want to waste your talent on that? And I said, I think that it's really important what's going on, that I have a voice, I can be articulate, and I really want to help be a contributor to the world. And he said, do you think that your music doesn't contribute to the world? Do you think that when people are done with a long, hard day of work, whatever that work is, that they don't need to have beauty brought into their life to remind them why the next breath is worth taking? And I can honestly say to him, I never thought of it that way, because music was always sort of me-centric. It was always about me getting from an audience what I needed, the affirmation or the reward or the compensation, whatever it was. I never actually took a thought at what music brought to the quality of life. And yet when people talk about the quality of life within a region, they talk about the beauty, and they talk about the intrinsic quality of the education, and then they talk about the arts in their community. And I think it is something that whether we overtly talk about or we understand at a more sort of fundamental level, the arts are pretty critical to us as a whole human being. And the loss of arts education in schools is huge. Music, in specific, is an abstract language. It's an abstract language that can be used to communicate sometimes in very distinct ways, and sometimes in very sort of more aloof, lofty sort of things. It's an abstract language which teaches people to think, to use the vernacular outside of the box. To have that removed from the daily education, not just for those kids who have voiced an interest in it, the ones who have joined the choir, the ones who have joined the band, but all of the children, that is a huge mistake. And when I hear about programs being cut, and I hear about, I should step back and say at least the Northwest Boy Choir is an organization that exists because we offer something that a lot of schools don't exist. In the last 20 years, as we've seen arts funding in schools go down, our enrollment has been spiking. And so I could tell you that that's a good thing for me. But the truth is, my organization sees probably 0.1% of the kids in our community. And we get wonderfully talented kids. How many thousands of brilliantly talented kids do we not get to see? Do we not get to work with? Fall through the cracks, and therefore do not find their calling in life, their mission in life. So I don't want to drone on about that. The other thing I would say, you heard my little piece about homework and that stuff. I work with high school kids, and I have a group of 40 high school kids who are extremely talented musicians, but are also athletes and student government and academics. And I've watched in the 25 years I've been in this job, these kids become slowly snowed over by the workload of homework that's put on them without any palpable difference in their intellectual capabilities. If I would see anything, I'd see a dulling in their eyes as I say, let's get together on the weekend and rehearse, and they'll all kind of moan and say, I've got so much homework, you know. My own children were very articulate about that. My son would come home and say, I have 4 hours probably of busy work. And I would say things like, well, why 4 hours? Why so many hours of work? He said, well, because in class we weren't very efficient today, and so the teacher needed to send us a bunch of work to do at home. So I guess as people in a position to impact a change, that would be a place where I would lobby, to make sure that teaching is being done by people like Jay, who are committed to actually teaching. And that teaching is not a process that's measured by anything other than the connection to the kids on an individual basis as best we can do. Any investment in quality teaching is investment in the future of the student. I have no wisdom what barometer you judge a good teacher or a bad teacher by. I have no wisdom on that. I do know that I have, it's a very subjective thing, unfortunately. But I do believe that in America we tend to spend a lot of time feeling sorry for ourselves or feeling like we're not keeping up with the rest of the world. But I work with young people on a daily basis, and I can tell you that young people are brilliant. They're brilliant. And they're capable of anything we want them to do. So I would love to see in our country, I'd love to see us get over the feeling sorry for ourselves and get back into feeling good about who we are and empowering our kids and not burdening them with things that are not of use to them, but empowering them with a sense of confidence and usefulness, and that will have immediate payback. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Thanks for saying what you did about homework. I need to remind myself not to assign too much homework. I always try to remind myself that here's why we're doing it and explain it to the kids. I don't feel worthy really to make recommendations in a room like this. There's so much expertise in the room that who am I to say what recommendations? But if you force me to, I can think of two things, and one has to do with involving families in learning in the classroom. Very predictably, you can see those kids who are achieving and are well-adjusted and doing well. They have parent support at home, they have all their needs met, they have those things going on. And the kids who are struggling, won't turn in work, typically don't have both parents in the picture. They maybe don't know what house they're staying at. They have so much else on their mind that they can't really think about learning. And I don't know the best way to involve families. I try, I email parents weekly, I call them, talk with them, you know, all these different things. But if there's a way for us to involve parents and get them to support students more, I only have them for a short time. The parents have them for the majority of the time. And you know, if you've seen movies like Waiting for Superman, you know that a parent's involvement in a kid's life is critical. They're advocating for kids who can't advocate for themselves. And you know, a great teacher can help, but we need to work together with parents. And I don't know what that is. You know, I'm trying different things, but the message I want to send out is that parents need to be involved. And it's a societal thing. I'm not playing the blame game. You know, we're all in this together. But very predictably, I can see the parents who are not involved, who don't come to conference, who won't answer my phone calls. Those kids are struggling, and then I don't want to throw up my hands, but I'm trying everything I can to help that kid. And when I hear them talk about their home life, I understand why they're struggling. And so, you know, that would be one thing that a resource that I would want to tap into for sure. And the second thing would be our own resource in building. My platform, they forced me to have a platform for this. I thought I was running for office or something, but I needed a platform. And in our hard economic times, you know, I thought, boy, I can't ask for more money, because everybody's just not going to be listening to that. But we have a resource already in place, and that's our own expertise, our own experience in building. We've got so many wonderful teachers who are doing so many wonderful things, but they're all in their own individual classrooms with their doors closed. And I've been trying harder in my building to get out and observe other teachers and welcome them to observe me, but I just feel like we're our own best resource in building already. The expertise that we have, the wonderful lessons and ideas that are helping to reach kids are working in isolation. And I would really want to see legislating accountability and collaboration is tough, you know, because that's not a popular thing. Hey, give more of your time to do this. But I've only become a decent teacher because I've stolen ideas from other people and I've given away things to other people. And I just did it this week. In fact, a lesson that I ran on Friday, I took from another former colleague of mine. And I just feel like that needs to happen much more often. We have all these great ideas, but they're happening in individual classrooms and no one ever sees it except for the students that are there, and they don't get a chance to be shared. So I would implore you to have the schools in your service districts to really make collaboration, make sharing of ideas a bigger part of things. There's so many things that could be shared if that happens.
Thank you. Let's move down to Dawn.
Well, I think there's two parts of it. One is community. We as a society really have to emphasize the importance of education. And I don't mean that in the sense of saying education is important. I mean being willing to step up and support education for kids. And I think all of us, whether you have children in school or not, it's a responsibility that we all have. And I think that's part of addressing the whole child, is that as a society that you have the expectation that you grew up with for all kids. And that starts with parenting without a question. And the good news is that there's a lot of great research and great information that's come out about the early years, the years before K through 12, and more people are understanding that and understanding that it's not about money, it's about attention to kids, and that really develops the whole child. So we have to continue as a society to invest in those kind of areas that will allow every child to enter school ready to learn, and then they can explore that whole child once they get there. And it will take the collective will of all of us in order for that to happen. And then once you get into school, I think unfortunately based on testing and based on budgets, it's come to a place where it's much more teaching of the skills, but not really how to apply those skills. And when you get into business and when you get into the rest of the world, the application of those skills is what's really important. And so my sister's a teacher. She teaches a community 3rd and 4th grade class in Iowa. And she does a tremendous amount with projects, things like poster projects, the invention convention, things like that really allow that child to get excited about what they've learned and apply it to something that's meaningful to them, whatever that is, whether that's music or whether that's a poem or whether that's speaking or whether that's sports or whatever it is, that the child has the opportunity to really take the skills, the basic skills that they've learned, and do something with it that excites them. Because I think that's how you engage the whole child, is by letting them get excited about what their possibilities are.
Thank you. Adora?
Yeah, well, my recommendation, I guess, is a fairly simple one. You guys are all, when you describe your purpose, it's probably to speak for kids and to do things for students. If there weren't students going to school, then your jobs probably wouldn't exist. And so to always remember students and in speaking for us to also listen to us, I think is a very important point, because a lot of people, we hear a lot of speaking about the next generation in a very third person way. When representatives are saying the American people don't want this, or our next generation, we have